what's the story before entrepreneurship, before investing, before even being a professional in the digital industry?
Wow. So I should start with the beginning. I started as a journalist, as a fact. I was still a student at that time at the philology faculty, University of Bucharest. And in the second year, I started to work to support myself. And I come from a normal family, quite poor family. So I worked a lot during the university. I worked first at Dilemma, one of the leading titles in the Romanian culture. And several years later, I was one of the founders of a new title, once again a cultural title. And I think it was 2003, when I completely changed the industries. It was something very intentional on my side. I left completely the cultural scene, the press, to enter into a new and fascinating world at that time, and that was the world of advertising. So I also was lucky enough to work at what was the best agency ever in Romania, Darcy, and I spent the next 15 years in advertising, and I started as a junior copywriter, and I went through all the phases: senior copywriter, creative director for half of Europe, country manager in Romania for one of the leading multinational agencies. So that was, in a nutshell, close to 20 years in my life.
How do you remember the country back then, 2004, 2005, when you made that switch?
Oh, at that time, advertising had an aura. It was the place to be. You made a lot of money. It was a creative industry. It was something so new. Everybody wanted to be in advertising. I remember that years later, I was teaching a course of advertising at the University of Bucharest. And one of my first questions to the audience was, okay, so what's your industry of choice? Where do you want to work? And to my surprise, everybody said, we want to be in television. So advertising was no longer cool, television was the new star. And most probably, if I would teach the same course again and ask the same question again, people would say, I want to have a startup. Everything changed during this time. So the success story at that time was to be employed by a multinational corporation and have a good salary, and also, if possible, have a company car, one with a lot of branding on it, So that was the success story.
You spent almost 20 years in advertising?
15
years?
Plus 5 years in the press.
Yeah. What made you quit the industry?
Once again, it was something very intentional on my side. It was the second big switch that I made in my life. And I was already at a level in the advertising industry where I couldn't see any kind of progress from that point on. I had the chance to work a lot abroad, pretty much everywhere in Europe, from Moscow to Paris, Düsseldorf. And probably I also got bored at that time. I got tired at that time because, as everywhere in services, there is just one thing that you know for sure, and that thing is that you are going to lose clients. It's inevitable to lose clients, and what you have to do always is to run and get new business and sign new clients, and it was exhausting. So in my life, I at that time I considered necessary to make the move, and as always, my move are a bit radical, I would say. So I left advertising never to return. I stated that the day I decided to leave. It was June 2013, and I never returned. So I made a switch towards an industry with a brighter future, in my opinion, with a lot of good energy, where you don't have to fight with anybody in order to build something meaningful. Moreover, in an industry which is collaborative, you work with others, you learn from others, you share with others, you give back to everybody who's interested to learn from you, because it's not like in order for me to win, I have to take something from you. in advertising, in services, in general, if you win a client, somebody else lost that client. So it's a completely different game. And I think that I had enough of this kind of game at that time. It was, in my opinion, probably the best move I ever made.
You mentioned that advertising was the cool kid once, then it was the big corporations, then the startups.
Mm-hmm.
What was your first connection to the startup world when you found about startups, about technology, how they move, how they work?
I like computer games. I still play StarCraft 30 years after they launched. So I play StarCraft like every day, Today, not today, but yesterday I play StarCraft. So for me, gaming was something very important. I'm in love with strategy games. And my first startup was in 2010, I started it. So I was still having a very well-paid job in the corporation when I started my first startup. It was called ESMUS, from Esports Management Platform. So it was a place where everybody could meet and play competitive games, esport industry, but it was way ahead of its time, very, very early. And so to get back to your answer, it was first of all gaming, and secondly, it was Y Combinator. You would laugh, I know, but I was reading about Y Combinator and I was amazed about this new business model of startups and growing fast and trying things, and it was amazing and fascinating, and I was captivated, and I still am, I think.
So 2010, the first startup.
Yeah.
How was it?
I made all the mistakes. It was a very difficult landscape to navigate in terms of regulation, because esports at that time was assimilated to gambling, even if it's not the same thing, but it was assimilated to gambling. And I had to incorporate in Cyprus a company. I had to pay a lot of money to lawyers to add clarity to where we are and what we should do. And I had all the bad experiences with outsourcing the product development to a software company. I remember one thing, because I worked very hard to write all the specifications, and I remember that the day that I made the first demo of the platform, there was a clock in the upper right corner of the platform, and that clock was not working. It was frozen, and I said, listen, dude, it doesn't work. Nothing is working, not even the clock. And the answer was something like, yeah, but in the specification that you wrote, you didn't mention that the clock should always tell the time. And I said, fuck it, that's it, no more, come on. And yeah, I made a scene, I remember, and they got a bit scared, and they said, okay, we'll fix it. It was a complete disaster. It was a mess.
But then you had a second startup, if I remember
well.
I
had several startups. Yeah. But I think that there is this mistake that I must mention. It never works if you try building a startup and you also have a job. It's impossible to do it. I mean, probably you have 2% chances to make it if you dedicate yourself fully to the startup. But if you also have a job, you have absolutely no chance to make it work. This game is completely different. So that's another mistake that I made at that time. So fast forward 2013, June 2013, when I resigned and I left the company. Meanwhile, I remember that I submitted several ideas to Y Combinator. So whenever they opened a new window for application, I was there submitting at least one idea to Y Combinator. And I kept doing this for the next 3 years, I think. And once again, I went through all the phases. Initially, when you write to the good accelerators, especially, you get no answer because your application is so bad. You don't deserve to get an answer, And in time, you start learning things, and then you apply again, and the first question comes. So You submit your application, and then there is this email asking for clarification about this thing or that thing. And you feel like, wow, I'm almost there. No, you are not there yet. It's just something that's not clear. And then they start asking for interviews, for calls, and in the end, they truly consider if they should send you the acceptance letter. So I went through all these phases, and it was 2014 now, when I was applying with another startup called Qalendra. It was a travel tech company, and I got accepted in 3 accelerators at the same time. And I remember that one of the accelerators was in Hawaii, travel tech, right? And I said, no, it looks too good to go there. If I go there, I won't work a day. Shouldn't go there. The other one was in London, inside Google. And the third one was in Seattle, the hometown of Expedia, Amazon, Boeing, so big corporations in travel or very, very close to the travel industry. And I remember that this one, the third one, the accelerator in Seattle, was investing to only $35,000. Compared to the other, it was little. The valuation was the worst. And I said, this is where I have to go. And I decided to go there, and I went there. And we were the first team ever accepted into this B2B program that was coming from outside the US. So we were very exotic for the Americans there. And I was discussing with Bogdan, my CTO, my partner in Qalendra at that time. And I was telling Bogdan, listen, we have to work twice as much as the Americans just to be on the same level with them. It only took us, I think, 2 or 3 weeks to realize that we are not able to work as much as the American, let alone twice as much, because at 3 in the morning, we must get the last bus to get home and get some sleep. So we set the alarm for 10 to 3 or something like that, and then we run to the bus station. And the Americans were still there working. And we were coming back in the morning, and the Americans were still there working. And we realized, damn it, this gap is not going to become smaller. This is only increasing in time. So what should we do? Yeah, so I had several startups. The second important one was this travel tech company. And it was a very smart idea, but again, a bit maybe ahead of its time. We were ingesting data from many, many sources. And we are creating predictions for where the best conditions for skiing, golfing, and any other activity would be in about 4 months. So 4 months in advance. And yeah, the next one was an electric scooter. So yeah, as you see, I have quite a lot of experience, hardware, software, everything.
How humbling was this experience of going from being a big shot in advertising to sending applications to Y Combinator, not getting an answer, maybe getting one small email. So going from 15 years of constant growth to this experience.
Very humbling, and I think that you must have something inside you that keeps pushing you, because even in advertising, when I became the CEO of the Romanian office, I started several companies inside the corporation. I initiated the digital division. I initiated the social action division dedicated to NGOs. So I think that all the time I had something in me trying to build things. So, but anyway, the moment that you leave the corporation, you leave the resources, you leave all the support that you are used to, right? I had a question about the finance. I would go to the financial department. I had my own CFO plus a team of 6 or 7. It was very nice, right? But once you leave the corporation, everything disappears. It's just you. And then your co-founders, if you're lucky enough to find some good people. I changed several teams, right? So I made all the possible mistakes, I'm telling you. But it's very humbling, because all of a sudden you have to face the reality, and you have to be very, very resilient. In my opinion, persistence is more important than being smart than anything. Just sheer persistence.
Why didn't you go forward with the startup or with any other startup, any other idea that you may have?
I got hooked, man. I got hooked with startups. And I think it's this building process that fascinates me, and creating value, and presenting a vision, and being very creative with it and being very ambitious, because startups is not about small applications doing trifles. It's about building something meaningful that people need and people would be willing to pay for what you do. And I love the energy. I think that in the startup world, you meet amazing, bright people. You also meet some crazy guys completely out of this reality, but that's life. And I love everything about startups. Maybe not that much the hype in recent times, but I remember 2010, 2013 when startup was not a cool word in Romania. To be the CEO of a startup was something unusual. What are you doing, Cristian? Are you quitting your job to do what? A startup? What's that? You know, are you crazy? And I think that at that time, people that were founding startups had a true call. They were genuinely entrepreneurs, founders at core, and they were not flashy. They were not trying to be in the spotlight just to be in the spotlight. Something changed in the years that that followed, and now it's socially acceptable. It's more than socially acceptable to be the CEO of a startup. It's a lot of posing, but also I think that the genuine entrepreneurs are there. You just have to find them among the fakers.
How do you identify personally the true founders from, how do you separate the true founders from the posers, from the fakers?
I would say that this is easy. You have to meet them, you have to talk to them, and you will notice if they have the spark or not. Of course, you have to have chemistry with the founders, and in your discussions with the founders, you understand what their values are, what's important for them, if they are hardworking or not, if they truly believe in what they're building or not, and they cannot truly fake it in front of a VC. I'm telling you this because we have so many data points, and we've done it. I mean, we've been there in their shoes. They cannot fake it. Other things they can fake, but being a genuine entrepreneur, this is something that's impossible to fake. You recognize all the keywords, all the fads in their speech, and when you hear this, you know that this is not the true thing.
You mentioned about the startup world back then in 2010, 2011. How different was from the world you were in, from the people you used to work with? You mentioned that competitiveness in advertising.
Advertising is very shallow. As an industry, it's very, very shallow. And there is a side effect of working in advertising, especially if you do it for years. Because you work today for a client in the, I don't know, dairy products, tomorrow with a beer producer, the day after tomorrow for a car producer or whatever, there is a risk that you get to that point where you think that you know the business. You don't know the business. You don't do their business. You are just consulting them on what pictures to select to put on walls. That's it. So doing advertising is not doing the actual businesses that your clients are in. And I met people while I was in advertising, and after that, people from advertising that had this sensation that they actually know business. No, this is completely different. And people in the startup world and people in the advertising industry, I think that maybe the creativity is the only thing that they share. But by creativity, I mean different things in the different industries. Because in advertising, creativity is somehow revered, is something that everybody is looking for, but creativity is very seldom just for the sake of creativity. It doesn't serve a larger purpose, you know, and that's the bad advertising. The good advertising is the truth well told, as Ogilvy said, I think. In the startup world, creativity must have a meaning, must be useful, must create value. Otherwise, the market will punch you in no time. And you will see it clearly that, okay, I've been very creative, but I'm losing money. Otherwise, I think that the industries are very different. I don't see many similarities between this, especially as in startups, especially at the early stage. You shouldn't pay any kind of agency, any kind of communication consultant, any kind of PR. You don't need that. You need to build your product. Never pay for PR in the startup world. Never pay for PR. never pay for a logo, never pay for the naming of the company. Don't do that. You create it from scratch. It doesn't matter anyway.
When did you decide to shut Qalendra, and when did you make the switch to investing?
Shutting down your startup is one of the most difficult decisions founders must take. I even wrote a blog post about when it's a good time to shut down your startup, because I think that this is painful and this is difficult. And my conclusion is that we all, right, everybody shuts down their startups too late. Nobody shuts it down today, and damn it, if only they would stay for one more day, the next day they would be a millionaire. Never happens this. You always shut it down probably 6 months too late, because it's something that you need to internalize. This is not going to work. This is a zombie. This is dead. I need to shut it down. And we don't want to have unsuccessful stories. We try to do everything in order to prove that we are successful. So we always shut it down too late. I realized, for me, it was, I would say, quite simple when I was forced to shut down the company, because we were running out of money. I was fundraising a round of $2 million. I was in the US at that time. I had one fund in San Francisco who committed on $1 million, and I was in discussions with 2 other investors for another ticket of $1 million. And it just happened. It was a Monday. In the same day, I received the email from one fund telling me it's a bit too early for us. And then just a few hours later, Y Combinator returned with an answer: no, it's not. This is not a fit. We're not going to do it. And that day, that evening, we shut it down. We archived everything. We put it on the shelf, and we said, "That's it. We need to move on. We need to move on." 2 years into that startup, doing everything possible to make it succeed, pitching hundreds of VCs. Pitching hundreds of angels in Seattle. After that, when we relocated to San Francisco, it was amazing as a learning experience. I mean, we learned so much, but in the end, we shut it down. And I think that for the next 2 or 3 years, I was asking myself if I did the right thing, because I remember I felt relieved when I shut it down. I said, and I was asking myself for years, is this something normal? I mean, to feel relieved after you shut down your startup? And yes, I think that it was just natural to feel that way, because I was so tired, exhausted, all the money depleted. It's difficult.
We imagine startup founders as almost teenagers, young people. You were young, but you had experience.
Not that young.
Not that young, yeah. So, and we know from the data that the best founders are 30 plus.
Yeah.
How was it for you? Because being in that environment of startups in San Francisco, Seattle, I suppose you saw a lot of 18, 19 years old, and you came from Romania, pitching your startup. How hard was to adapt to that culture?
Very difficult. So it's very difficult if you are a French or German guy and relocate to San Francisco. If you are a Romanian guy, Bulgarian, Polish guy, it's even more difficult, because you come from Eastern Europe, not Western Europe. So the culture gap is huge, absolutely huge. Everything was different in the US. And I had a second shock when I returned from the US back to Europe, because I was already accustomed to the American way of thinking. And when I get back to Europe, I was like, what are you doing here? Hey, this is not speed. You keep talking about speed, but you are moving so slowly. So I was coming from a very harsh place where everything is about work and effort, maximum effort, to quote Deadpool, back to Europe, and the pace of doing things, the European pace of doing things. So yeah, it was a nightmare, but at the same time, I loved it. If you ask me, I would never live in the US. I would live in Italy. That's where the life is good. But for business, US is the place to be. If you truly want to do business, if you are ready to sacrifice everything, relationship, time, resources, everything, just to be successful in business, you need to move there. If you truly want to do it, you need to move wherever your industry is. If you are building a fintech, you need to move on in New York or London, let's say. If you are building an advertising tech company, you need to be in New York on Madison Avenue. If you are building anything in deep tech, you need to be in Silicon Valley. So, if you don't do that, it means that for you is more important your personal comfort than the good of your company. And it's already something that tells things about you and your commitment and what kind of a founder you are. So I always, and this is something about my personality, all in. Okay, I'm in skydiving, I do base jumping, I'm all in. This is my nature. And I think that in the startup world, if you are not all in, your slim chances become even more slimmer. It's almost impossible to do it otherwise.
You mentioned speed. What's the difference, or why is this difference in speed between European startups and American startups or founders?
I have this mantra: never sacrifice speed. So this is something that all the founders should put it on the wall big, in big letters, and always respect this mantra: never sacrifice speed, because speed is the most important thing for a startup. But in an obsessive way, I mean speed in an obsessive way. If I talk to a technical team from a startup and I ask them, okay, we need to change this onboarding, let's say, this onboarding customer experience, how long does it take, guys, to create a new experience? They would say something like, yeah, 2 weeks. My next question would be, okay, I get it, 2 weeks, but what can you do until tonight? You know, this is speed. This is the way of doing it. This is the way of doing it obsessively. If we build a sales team, because speed, you must be fast in all the aspects of your business. Let's say that it's not about the tech team, it's about the sales team, and you are building a sales team, and you are in a B2B kind of a startup, and you need to cold call clients, okay? And we are building the quota, the plan. How many people do we have in the sales team? How many calls each of these salesmen should do per day? In Europe, the answer would be, okay, and we have 5 people, and each of them will make 10 calls per day, 20 days per month. In the US, it's make 500 calls per day per people, not 10, 500 per day, 500 per day, and do it using 2 different email addresses with 2 different names, and do it for each potential client with 2 contact persons inside those companies. This is obsession, this is speed, and this is how you build a pipeline, and this is how you build sales, and this is how you build success. With 10 calls per day, you are just building, I don't know, I don't know what you're building.
You shut down Qalendra. What was the period from that moment to getting into it? To the next startup? Was it the next startup?
Yeah, it was the next startup. After Qalendra, it took me days to jump into the next startup, Scooterson, an electric scooter. Very nice looking, and I was creating this. I joined as CEO, and I joined late as CEO, which is something unusual, especially for Romanian startups. And I created this new vision about how could you ride a bike or a scooter in a world of autonomous cars, because the cars around you would move by themselves, and how are you supposed to ride in this kind of new traffic, right? And I created the concept of this autonomous or autonomously assisted smart scooter, and everybody was, wow, we never thought of this, you know, when I pitching VCs. And this was a beautiful story because the prototype was already built at that time, and I took the prototype and I put the prototype on Caltrain, which is the main train that goes throughout the valley, and it was very difficult to explain the conductors, hey, what is this? It's a scooter. Is it electric? Yes. Does it have a battery? Yes. Get down off the train. Oh, please, I'll get down to the next stop. And I think that I told this story about me in front of Y Combinator in the parking lot, waiting for the partners to come out so that I could make a demo and give them a drive test. And I spent hours there. And founders were having office hours with the partners of YC, and they getting in, getting out. And I just offered everyone to test the scooter. And at one moment, the partners of YC came out of the building, and I had the chance to talk to them. And it was amazing because they asked me amazing questions. They asked me, Paul Boucher, the founder of Gmail, for example, was asking me, okay, so how much does it cost to make it? And the cost was around $1,500. And where do you make it? In China. Okay, but what if you would sell it for 1,000? And I was, oh, hey, it costs 1.5K to make it. How can I sell it with one? No. Think of it like this. Let's say that you make 1 million scooters. Okay, for sure the price in China to produce 1 million scooters would be way below 1,000. So, and I was, wow, the scale. The way that they were thinking about building something, it was completely different from what's in Europe. Europe, not Eastern Europe, Europe. So yeah, it took me just days to jump from one startup to the other. It took longer to jump from startups to VC.
How?
And that was happening in 2017 in December, I think. A friend of mine, a professor at Columbia University, very involved with startups, just sent me the link to a public call published by the EIF. They were looking for fund managers to create the first venture capital funds in Romania. And my friend just sent me the link and said, hey, you should apply. And I spent several days thinking about it. And I remember perfectly, I was on the balcony, at home on the balcony, looking on the window and just thinking of things. And at that moment I said, damn it, let's do it. And I went directly to the computer, opened my laptop and started to write the application. And I wrote alone by myself the entire application. It took me like 3 weeks. Talked to partners, found 2 other partners to join the team. So I started this startup. The VC fund is still a startup. And then I went to this, once again, very, very difficult and complex process of building a fund manager, and once again navigating the legal system because it's difficult to set up a new fund. And then fundraising once again. And just think of it like this. If you are a founder of a startup and you build an object, let's say, whenever you go fundraising, you tell your investors, listen, this is what I build, and for this I need 1 million. Are you in or out? But as a fund manager, they ask, okay, so why do you need 60 million? I don't know. I will see, but right now I don't have the answer because I don't have the startups in which to invest yet. But believe me, I'm going to make smart investments. It's much more difficult to fundraise for a fund than for a startup. And this is what I've done. But once again, I think that I was lucky enough. In December 2018, we had what is called the closing of the fund, which means that from that point on, you start operating, you start making investments from your fund. And in January, we actually started investing from Fund 1. And we've been investing from this fund for 4.5 years, almost. Yeah.
How did you find the other founders of Early Game Ventures? Because you mentioned you went on the lookout for people to join you.
Oh, yeah. Fund 1 has a very restrictive mandate in terms of geographic scope. So we only invest in Romania with Fund 1. Fund 2 that we are closing towards the end of this year will be more generous in terms of geographic scope, meaning that once again we'll be focused on Romania, but we have freedom to invest everywhere in the world as well. So with Fund 1, I was looking for partners with experience in the Romanian startup ecosystem. And I talked to Victor and Vlad. They were the first partners in this team. And they had amazing experience because they were the founders of the first co-working center, the first place for founders to meet. And that was way ahead, me starting Esmus 2010. So they had much more experience, in fact, with the Romanian ecosystem than myself. But what I brought to the table was my American experience and everything I've done with the acceleration program in which I was involved. Because besides Seattle, I was also then later on in a hardware accelerator, the best hardware accelerator in the world, Hux in San Francisco. So I had a lot of experiences that proved to be very useful for founders. It's just as difficult to find partners for a VC fund as it is to find co-founders for a startup. Maybe it's even more difficult because the seniority of these partners, that you need to have very senior partners in the fund alongside you, and these people usually they are already involved in one or other things, so the timing is very important. The moment in their life in which they may decide to take this step is important. Luck, once again, is important. Luck is a factor that you should always take into account.
You had experience in the Romanian market, had experience with startups. You went to the US. Were you looked at as an outsider when you started raising the fund?
Yes.
For the fund?
Yes. They say that raising the first fund is impossible, that no one should do it. Because, it's impossible. And yet there are a few first-time fund managers each and every year. A handful of crazy guys that manage to raise a fund against all odds. And we were such crazy guys that managed to raise the fund. Of course, we needed support, and the support came from the European Investment Fund, or Anchor LP, with a significant ticket. And in a young ecosystem as Romania, 2018, right? We discussed about 2018. The name of the European Investment Fund was very important. It granted comfort to the private investors, because they said, okay, maybe as an investor in funds, I don't have experience, but the European Investment Fund, they did all the due diligence, and I trust these guys because they know what they're doing. So that was instrumental. We couldn't raise any kind. Nobody did it until then without the support from the European Investment Fund.
What was the influence of these European instruments, European Investment Fund, in putting together what's right now the Romanian ecosystem? Because it made it accelerated a bit.
It accelerated a lot. It ignited, in fact, the Romanian ecosystem. There was a Romanian ecosystem very, very early, before 2018. 2018 and 2019 were the years when the first VCs set up and focused on Romania launched, right? And everything changed since then. Everything changed very, very fast since then, but everything. There was an early ecosystem populated with just a handful of startups and just a handful of very brave angel investors that were investing their own money, not large amounts, but their own money, and they were truly brave. Dan Călugăranu, my partner in early game, he was the chairman of Tech Angels, the largest association of angel investors in Romania. And Dan have been investing years before I even started startups. And Dan is very, very connected to the market, and he knows everybody because he's been there since the beginning of it. And these kind of people were there. But everything changed with the launch of the proper VC funds, because all of a sudden millions in capital were available, right? All of a sudden a handful of people became professional investors. We dedicated all our time to finding and investing and managing and working with startups. So it was no longer the angel investor, but we were the institutional investor, and everything changed there. Yeah.
Let's talk about this change.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned it brought a lot of people into the ecosystem, a lot of new startups that were funded. How was it for you to manage these funds from the EIF and the private investor? How difficult was maybe comparing it to building your own startups?
Mm-hmm. It's a different job, to be honest, and we all learned a lot. We have a huge library. I've read more than 200 books about VC, right? Even if I met a lot of VCs and I pitched a lot of VCs as a founder, now I realized that I was not good at it, that I made a lot of mistakes, because not for 1 second I was never thinking about the risk, the way that the investor perceives risks. So I was going to the pitch and pitching the investors, but just selling the company, selling myself, but not for one moment thinking about the way they see it, about their perspective. And now, as an investor, I can relate to the founders that do the same thing, because I was there. I can relate to the founders that are not comfortable asking money, because I was there. I am not necessarily comfortable asking money when I do the fundraising for the fund, and this keeps me humble, right? Each and every 4 years when we do the fundraising, we are the founders asking for money, and this is a very useful exercise. But I can relate with the founders, and I think that this is something that maybe we need more in the Romanian ecosystems, venture capitalists with the background of a founder. It's useful to have lawyers, to have consultants, to have financial people as investors. But I think that at least one of the partners in the VC team should come with this kind of background.
How was the journey for Fund One in early game ventures? And maybe what have you learned by investing in different startups, the good and the bad?
Romania today, 2023, it's still a buyer's market. Very few investors, not that much capital left to be invested, and a lot of startups raising funds. So it's easy. From this perspective, it's easy to be the investor. It's much more difficult to be the founder. Romania is a buyer's market, probably will keep being the buyer market for the next, 3 to 5 years. But after that, for sure, the market is going to change deeply. I already see foreign funds becoming more interested in Romania, active investing here. So things are already changing in this perspective. But otherwise, the very few active investors, the one with serious money, with millions ready to be invested, we act as gatekeepers. So yes, we make efforts to have proprietary deal flow, and we try to find the smart guys working in a laboratory at the Polytechnic University and never pitching anywhere, But at the same time, we get incoming requests for funding, and we need to evaluate. And we have the advantage of seeing so many teams and so many pitches and collecting so many data points that at one moment, 1 year later, 2 years, 3 years later, you already have references. And whenever somebody comes and pitches you, say, okay, I've seen this already, it never worked, or it worked, but it needed this kind of pivot, and this kind of approach doesn't work. And, you already know much more about startup land than the founders who are pitching you. For example, just to give you an example, I'm very cautious whenever a founder is pitching us what I call a rainbow model. And Qalendra, my startups back in the days, was such a rainbow product. For the product to deliver the full value proposition to the clients, we were supposed to develop the algorithms for skiing, golfing, beach activities, fishing, so many activities. And it takes a lot of money and time and resources to build that many algorithms, But without all these algorithms, we don't have the rainbow. We only have one color. And nobody will look on the sky and see a red color and say, look, it's an incomplete rainbow. So that's the problem with this kind of startups that need to be fully developed in order to produce the value. And what I don't say that I'm not investing into this. I am. But what I want to see is a very coherent go-to-market strategy. Okay, so if this is the plan to build this, and this in order to make it round, show me how you will survive, how you will bring it to market, and how you will be successful. If you convince me, I don't have any kind of problem to invest in a rainbow product. It's fine for me. So this is just one example.
How does it feel because you are meeting with early stage startups? They don't have a lot of financials. They don't
No.
have a P&L to show you, an Excel.
Very rudimentary.
Yeah. How do you try to understand in the team what can work and what cannot work?
These are the big questions. Should we invest into something that exists, into something that may exist? What's the right choice? And the question is even more complex in Romania, because what I realized at one point is that many times the deck, the presentation is bad, but the company is good. The founders, they know how to build a product, but they don't know how to express themselves or how to put up a good deck. So when I realized that, I said, okay, I need to meet even with the people with a bad deck, as long as I see something good in that, you know. And it happened many times that the reality behind the deck is better than the deck itself. So you need to understand this and not to ask for good decks, but for good startups in Romania. I expect that in the coming years, people will become better at storytelling and writing nicer and much more clear presentations. But for the time being, this is the situation. So we have this discussion with any startup that in which we think there is something good, right? Because the idea is not to find a startup that is great in all the aspects: team, competition, product, technology, fundraising strategy, go-to-market strategy. This startup doesn't exist. But you need to find a startup that is amazingly good in at least one of all these verticals that we analyze. So maybe the startup has an amazing product, but they don't know how to sell it. It may be investable. It may be the best idea to invest in such a startup. Maybe the startup has a very bad product, but they have an amazing go-to-market strategy, something super smart that would propagate, that would go viral. And yes, then we need to tweak a bit the product. But if you already have this secret sauce embedded in your business model, that's super valuable. You want to invest into that. Maybe the startup doesn't have the product, doesn't have the go-to-market strategy, but the team is amazing, and these guys will find a way. So, and you invest in the people. They said that there are three kinds of investors: the investors that invest in people, in technology, or in markets. Sequoia, for example, they invest in markets. If you want to raise money from Sequoia, you must show that your startup is addressing a big problem in a big industry, you know. And there are billions out there that may be used to pay for your services. As a generalist fund in Romania, which is a small market, we cannot say that we only invest in people or only in technology or only in markets. We need to be very flexible and opportunistic. Venture capital is about opportunism. It's about understanding what the market has to offer and choosing well. And how you choose well, that's the secret sauce of each and every team. You must have chemistry with the founders, and if you're a lawyer or, you know, probably you have chemistry with a different kind of people than I have. We are different as people. Maybe I don't know, maybe I have chemistry with the bad people and you with the right one. Good for you. What I'm telling is that the chemistry is an important aspect, because you need to work with the founders for the next 4 years, and you need to be able to talk to those people. And then you need to have some sort of a framework in which you think, because you need to be consistent. You need to prove the investment thesis if you have one. Many VCs, they don't have an investment thesis. And if you have one, then you need to understand if it's a right investment thesis. And you need to be consistent. We do it this way. We have a framework with 9 things that we are looking at. And I just told you a few of them, like the team, the product, the competition, the go-to-market strategy, the fundraising strategy. And then we have 2 horizontal lines. Whatever is down in the bottom. At the bottom is red, then you have the yellow area and the green area. And for example, when we discuss about the first vertical, which is the team, we want to see the 3 founders, ideally, the 3 founders. The visionary, the hustler, and the hacker. The visionary is the CEO, the hacker is the CTO, and the hustler is the sales guy. And this is a theory, but ideally you must have covered these 3 skills in your founding team. And if you have this, you are in the yellow area. If the founding team is incomplete, of course, you are in the red area. And to be in the green area, you must also prove that you are able to hire and retain talent. So besides the initial core team of founders, you also must go deeper into it and show that you are also a good employer. And we have criteria for each of these. And then whenever we meet a startup, we evaluate the startup on this framework. It's complex. It's once again, it takes experience to understand where a specific team is when it comes to competition or go-to-market strategy. But we are professionals. This is what we do. And at the end, we reach a conclusion. And the most important conclusion as an investor is, are you making the bet or not? Are you investing or not? That's the most important thing. Because at the early stage, once you decide to make the investment and something goes wrong, you are part of the problem. I mean, you already jumped. Maybe you should have looked better before jumping, but you already jumped and now things are going south. So that's it. You may lose everything.
So you have 5 years of investing in the Romanian market with the Fund 1. What would you consider your successes as of now, if there are?
I was explaining this to somebody else that the larger fund, you don't know who the larger fund is when you launch the fund, you know only when you close the fund. At the end, when you draw the line and see exactly how much money you made. At the early stage, you don't know who the winners are. Some companies may look on the right track at one moment and on the wrong one just a few months later, If I look at our portfolio, we have some amazing companies in our portfolio. Companies in which we invested at 4.8 million and now are raising at 100 million, their Series A or Series B. We have companies in which other very large foreign funds invested alongside us. We have companies that already relocated to the US, UK, Spain, Israel. We have companies that have clients on 5 continents. So we have a lot of success stories, even if the companies are very young. So if we have been investing for 4.5 years, that means that half of our portfolio is less than 2 years old, right? Startups needs time. I told earlier that speed is important. Speed. Okay, doesn't matter how fast you move, because in the end you still need time. You need to adjust. You need to hire. It takes time to hire. It takes time to sell, especially if you are in enterprise software sector. It takes a lot of time. Everything takes time. And our portfolio is still young, but it's very promising. I truly believe that in the next 5 years, we'll have 2 or 3 unicorns in Romania. And I like to think that all 2 or 3 are in our portfolio.
You mentioned that Romania is still a buyer's market, but that's going to change. How much competition is in the VC area in Romania between funds that maybe fight for the same startups?
Today, there is not so much competition in Romania when it comes to the buyer side. I think that if we look at Central Eastern Europe as a region, as an ecosystem, we are at one extreme of the spectrum and Poland is at the other, because there are close to 80 VC funds, 80 VC funds in Poland, which in my mind is insane. It's too much. It's just too much. There are not 80 good companies per year in Poland. And we discussed about 80 investors in Poland. But in Romania, there are very, very few. So the competition is not too tough. And moreover, venture capital, unlike conventional private equity, is very collaborative. It's almost never that a VC takes the entire round by itself and writes one big check and that's it. You always invite co-investors. So we co-invested with pretty much everybody in the Romanian landscape. RocaX, Parking, Gapminder, many angels. We always save tickets for angels that may come and create value besides the money. So besides the small ticket that they invest. So when it comes to competition, I think that we are okay.
You mentioned these two parts of the spectrum, Poland and Romania. How would you describe basically the Romanian market inside this ecosystem, this regional ecosystem?
Romania is the second largest market in CEE after Poland, which already means something, especially for startups in B2C, where you need to test your product or service in the local market. Imagine that you are a startup in Slovenia or Croatia, very small countries. You cannot test anything there. So from this perspective, Romania is a large enough country in the region. Also, when it comes to the talent, you have very good software engineer to hire in Romania. Once again, if you come from Slovenia, it's going to be much more difficult for you to find talent. So I think that we have the good premises in the region to become one of the most important players, and we already are one of the most important players. I see, for example, startups from Bulgaria that look towards the Romanian market as a natural expansion country. I see Romanian startups looking at the Polish market to expand there. But I would say that the deep tech companies and the most ambitious startups, they are looking at the global markets from day one. They try to open an office in the UK, in the US, not necessarily in the region. But we are in this region. We must understand this region. There are many VC funds in this region that are looking towards Romania, trying to find companies in which to deploy capital. So one of our roles is also to connect our portfolio company to these investors that are interested.
Do you think that the Romanian startups and founders have learned to have enough speed and the desire to implement things as to be competitive on the global market?
No. It's a harsh answer, but no, I don't think so. And I think that the level of obsession that you need is still something very difficult to find, not in Romania, in Eastern Europe and in Europe at large. That level of obsession, you know, the famous saying, only the paranoid survives. The CEO of Intel said it. That's not something common. These founders are the good founders, the difficult founders. They are not yes men. They are obsessed with their product. They are laser focused. They are super intense in everything they do. They are not easy to talk. They are not easy to coach. It's difficult to serve to the board of their companies. You must have chemistry, once again, this word with this kind of people. And this is not how people generally are. People want to be nice. People want to have a life. People want to be home at 7 and back in the office at 10, not at 6 in the morning, right? And I think that the culture, the mindset is so far from the intensity required by startups in Europe, Central Europe, Romania. If you tell somebody what it truly means to be, because many people pretend to be intense and pretend to be obsessed and passion is a word they use, passion, right? But when you tell them exactly what that would mean, they say, no, that's crazy. You cannot do that. You cannot live like that. Exactly.
What do you need to leave behind in order to?
Comfort. The first thing that you need to give up is your comfort. And if you need to move to the other face of the earth, I did it. Seattle is exactly on the opposite side of the planet. For your startup, get in the plane, do it. If you need to wake each morning at 4 in the morning, and change 2 buses to get 30 kilometers away in the office, do it each and every day. If you need to spend all your savings, if you need to sell your collectible car, do it. I did it. Okay, and if you do all this, you still have 2-3% chances to make it. Okay, so most likely you won't make it, even if you do this. Now, if you don't want to do this, if you want to build your next American dream, success dream from Bucharest, if you want to be in the office at 10, have a good night's sleep, be back at home at 7 because you have a family and blah, blah, then I don't know exactly what chances you have.
Why do people fight for that 1% chance?
Well, the motivation, I don't think that there are a million reasons why people do that. I think that mainly it's about the money and it's about the sense of meaning. And if you only try to get a millionaire doing this, it's going to be very difficult. If it's about the meaning and if you are hungry and you are obsessed and you are ambitious, then you have an additional chance to truly make it succeed.
You mentioned a bit about the evolution of the Romanian market. How do you see the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, based on how everything evolved in the last 10 years, I would say that we have a bright future ahead of us. Technology has a bright future in Romania. I think that the sophistication level of founders will increase. They will get more literate, they will get more comfortable pitching, they will know how to tell a story better. I also think that it's going to be easier to find good salespeople and marketing people because the startups so far have trained these people. And it's going to be easier in the future. I think that the talent pool will increase when we discuss about technical talent because more and more people start writing code. I think that the sophistication level of investors will increase. I already see a transition from angel investors, people that used to invest their own money directly into startups, to LPs, limited partners, people that invest their own money in venture capital funds. So practically they trust other fund managers with their money, and then they are indirectly invested in a portfolio of startups. And this already tells a lot about the sophistication level and the way that the investors evolve. I think that the universities will become, but this is in the long run, more important in the local ecosystem because right now they are not so present. And I think that the larger framework will also evolve. And I mean here accountants, lawyers, accelerators, consultants. I think that the entire market is growing. It's growing fast. Faster some aspects than others, but everything is growing and evolving. So I'm very positive. I think that once again, we'll have unicorns coming from Romania.
Comparing it to this moment right now, when you look at all the funds available in the Romanian market, you mentioned that for the second fund you have a bigger scope, but focused on the Romanian market. If you were to put a number, which is the sum which would be needed by the Romanian ecosystem in order to be competitive? I mean, to have this connection between funds and also startups available to finance.
It's difficult to say. What I can tell you is that even the best capitalized startups in Romania, and by this I mean startups that raised 2-3 million, and there are not that many, they are undercapitalized when it comes to hiring 2 salesmen in San Francisco, because it costs 600 to 700,000 per year, 1 salesman in San Francisco. So if you raise 3 million and you have to pay 1.5 to hire 2 people per year, it means that you don't have the money to do it. So in this respect, the capital requirements, the capital needed is quite high. Probably 200, 300 millions over the next 5 years. And this is the early stage. It could be too early to have a growth fund, a proper growth fund in Romania right now, because there are not enough companies yet in which to invest 15 million today. There are just a few, but you cannot have a fund dedicated to this only in Romania. But I would say that 2 to 300 million for the next generation of funds, only for early stage VC, that should do it. Let's not do the mistake that, in my opinion, they made it in Poland, to just throw money away and invest in anything. Because most of the companies that raised money there in the last years are bad companies. And not all the companies deserve a chance. Only the best deserve a chance. For our investors in Fund 2, I made an analysis on the deal flow recently. It was after 3 years of investment. And I can tell you that in the first 3 years, we received more than 1,500 decks presentation. And with 362, we started to discuss, because we said, wow, this is something truly interesting. Let's go deeper. And we made 28 investments, which means that the conversion rate from the second screening to investment is 0.7%. Practically, we met. So it's not just that we read the presentation. We met and we started discussing with 120 startups to make one investment. So this is VC. You need to set the standard high. You need to be very demanding. Otherwise, you will lose money. It's not a possibility. It's a certainty. You will lose money. But once again, the American way of thinking, meet 120, make one investment, and then try to be lucky. Try to be lucky means work like hell with them, to support them, to hire, to everything.
How do you keep yourself sane when seeing 120 startups, knowing that you will invest maybe in one?
I'm very optimistic. I think that my nature is very positive. Sometimes I meet with startups because I see something in their presentation that is not actually there. I mean, I see a potential, and this is why I take the meeting sometimes, just to realize during the meeting that that was just my understanding about their deck, and it was never their intention to build something like that. But it's important to have the nose and to sense the potential in companies. Especially if you don't want to invest in average companies. You want to invest in outliers. You want to invest in companies that come with something truly brave. And this is what I'm looking, especially brave companies. There are not that many. Because you can fake pretty much anything in this world except for courage. Courage is something that you cannot fake because you need to prove it daily. Nobody will say, oh, this is a brave man, until you do something brave. So you must be brave in the startup world.